Thanks, Kim. Okay, back to our attempt to resolve those three questions insofar as our little history mysteries are concerned. We don't really know what happened to Juvenal beyond his martyrdom, and we don't know in detail why he was martyred. Yet curiously, the so what question can be investigated despite our ignorance. What happened to him must have influenced the course of Russian missionary activity, at least in that region, and the church's work in Alaska must have been affected accordingly, then, later, and perhaps even now. And again, perhaps Sister Victoria will address herself to this issue later. On the methodological or historiographic side of the Juvenal mystery, though we can't be evidentially positive that his diary is a forgery, it almost certainly is. Why it was forged will probably remain a mystery, though we do know that Petrov disliked the church and loved a good story. The significance of the forgery is clearer. It prejudiced Juvenal's good name and therefore the good name of the church. Historiographically, we know what happened in the case of the lost pre-bearing colony, and we know why it happened. Here the most important answers to the so what question are again historiographical, and are these. Methodologic errors can waste the time of scholars and researchers and delay what appears to be a need for archaeological investigation. We have sketchy information about how Sunrudna got lost and why, but we don't know where it was. If we did, I assume we don't. If we did, perhaps the archaeological anthropologist could unearth new evidence of prehistoric life on the Kenai and could propose from that evidence useful resolutions of the so what question. We know what happened in the naming of the peninsula as far as I went, and why. The third question is more difficult. In fact, the long-range significance escapes me. Perhaps the accuracy of native names has been or is a social or political issue. I don't know. Well, this is only a crude effort to answer our three questions. You've noticed that the largest part of each mystery in this sample of historical enigmas is methodological, and maybe the best answers to the so what question are also historiographical. First, scholars, whatever their reputation, make mistakes. Second, documents, evidence, however prestigious the depository in which it resides, may be fake. Third, the second and third questions, the why and so what questions aside, given the state of historical inquiry in some fields, the first question, what happened, may be the most important question. Any reliable contribution to our knowledge of what happened in this region's past is a significant contribution. Fourth and finally, historical research rewards the practitioner not just in the satisfaction of knowing and the satisfaction of knowing first, but like the storyline of a good detective story, a good whodunit, the investigative process itself may be a heck of a lot of fun. And those of you who haven't tried it, I hope after this conference you will. And with that, I'll await any questions that the audience may have. Any questions? Have I encouraged anybody to do any of this research? Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan Sherwood, for that entertainment, as well as historical facts. We are going to prepare now to hand out our project for this conference, and that is our book. We will have students handing them out to you. Just one momento. I really don't feel enough can be said of what our students have done in also helping for this conference. They've been most cooperative, as well as the teachers in charge of them, and I'm very proud of that fact. I think this is one of the things that I realized out of working on this conference, are the teachers. I asked them to do something and they came through, and the students, it's just been glorious. So I know you've seen the Emmy Awards, and the actor will come up, they'll grab the Emmy or the Academy Award, they hold it to their heart, and they say, with tears running down their cheeks, I could not have done this without my mother or my husband or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's exactly the way I feel about this conference, and especially about this book. It could not have been done without the cooperation of Pat O'Connell and his crew in the graphic arts, or Georgia Alexander and her Kenai Clerical Corporation girls. They did an impossible, believe you me. They did stay up. The half days, girls stayed to type. The fellows were working this weekend and putting this book together, and they did stay up late last night. This morning, Mr. O'Connell, early this morning, and putting this book together, and so it is a work of art. Another thing to brag about, one student was very, well, bashful or something, but Mike Letstring did the cover of your program, which is the same thing here, and he didn't sign it. I was asked him to be sure to sign his work, and he did not. And I've known that, I would have put acknowledged who did the drawing on the back on the acknowledgments, and it is Mike Letstring. So credit should be given to that student who did the cover. I noticed that the students did sign their artwork throughout the book. So with that in mind, we will prepare to hand out the books. There's one thing that I'd like to mention is that if you're a teacher with X number of students, you get one book. We're going to be sending these books out to the libraries throughout the peninsula, to the university library, to many other areas. So if you have so many students, well, the teacher gets one. And they are free, and one will be given to each person. So we may have students out in the hallway, too, to help hand these out. While they are doing that, Karen Workman, your husband have your meal tickets. So, Bill, the packet was given Alan, and hopefully he has everything, including, all right, I see his head shaking, he understands. And some of the people who have not picked up their envelopes are Mavis Cohn, Nancy Davis, Bob and Jane Gray, Herb Hilcher, Norma Hoyt, Elmer Knudsen and May Knudsen, Rachel Mickelson, James Monty, Russell Seepy, Mabel Smith. Now these are people who paid for meal tickets, not people who called in and said, could I reserve one? Those of you who called in and reserved a meal ticket, you'll just pay in the cafeteria line or the line tonight. For the Russian meal, I will be giving Roberta Ivanoff a list of names so she knows that you did reserve a ticket. And if I didn't call off your names, it's possible if you sent a check in the mail, I haven't gotten it. It might be coming this afternoon's mail. Do you have any questions along that? I saw a hand up back there. There's a warning. I can't hear you. Oh. Okay, there's a car out in the parking lot. It has their lights on. And if you hear Rosa, well, you know what car. I can't hear her.
End of taping session in the morning of November 7th.
Today for lunch.
is when we come to know what they've done with the oral tradition, that we learn again that most all of us would agree, because we're here at this conference, that we need to be about our heritage. Because in knowing our heritage, we might find a renewed sense of identity, and in a time when problems are pressing in upon us from every way, when great wealth is a lively prospect, we have many options to face. We must face them all across the great land. We'll be facing them in our villages. We'll be facing them alone, perhaps where we find ourselves not in a village at all, but responsible for what is done to the land at the point we are at the moment. Or whether we are in towns and villages, or whether we have responsibilities for the state. I must say that, so I realize this is completely extemporaneous because I'm about to speak for Bill Jorgensen, but I have never been so cheered as an Alaskan citizen as I am this very day. This day. Cheered at the prospect this conference provides, at the example it provides. Cheered at cheered about the prospect of leadership, for whether Jay Hammond or William Egan find themselves in a few days with the great responsibility of being a leader in this state. It doesn't matter which one. That person must lead a new life and a renewed people. I can't praise the makers of this conference. I can't praise this school, the students in it. That small June conference there at ANU in 1967, none of us knew the inspiration, the dynamic force that conference and coming together as we are this morning and this afternoon and tomorrow, what it would work. Let me tell you what it worked, which is visible, above ground archaeology. First off, within 4 months, the Alaska Historical Society was founded November the 13th, 1967. Within 2 years, the Alaska Journal became a reality. I think this is a fine journal of history and arts. And we might say that it will grow, and it will grow in excellence as more and more people will submit quality items for publication. This is a landmark. The old Alaska Sportsman and Alaska Magazine was, and we're beholden, every citizen in this state, to the publishers of the Alaska Northwest Publishing Company, Bob Henning in the main, and to the editorial excellence of Bob the Army. Labors of love. They really aren't making any money on this, and it behooves, it seems to me, all Alaskans who are interested to subscribe. If you are a member of the State Society, you may subscribe to this for $6 a year. I know I sound like a huckster, and I am. But this was one of the very important things in addition to the State Society that came about out of that conference in 1967. The Archival and Records Management Act of the State of Alaska of 1971 came from that inspiration in part. The Historic Preservation Act of 1971 came from the National Preservation Act of 66 and its needs and our needs and the happy the happy coincidence of historic preservation of physical, cultural remains here in this state. That has then seen the creation and the division of parts of the Office of History and Archaeology. I think a group of dynamic workers who've done more for this state than you can imagine. And now the creation of a new office, which is that of the chief of statewide cultural programs. And this is now being served by the same person who was the first state park historian and who was later joined by Karen Workman as state archaeologists. In addition to that, we've seen the creation of the Alaska Historical Commission. So many things come from small beginnings. And I know people who still refer to the proceedings of the conference at 1967. It's now out of print. And there were many good things printed therein, suggestions, open questions, and an exhortation to get with it. Well, I'm here this morning quite by accident. I really am supposed to have my opportunity tomorrow at lunch to talk about writing Alaska's history, which all of these other people have been doing. But I do want to bring greetings from the Alaska Historical Society to you, to each one of you, and to those who have put on this conference. On behalf of the President, William Jorgensen, who is now in his second presidential year. Some of us have served as presidents before, but they never thought we were good enough to renew the option. But we have a fine president from Juneau, Bill Jorgensen, and he's very sorry that he can't be here today. He was away from his desk there for 10 days in the last week, and he simply couldn't be with us this morning. I'm sorry. But the Alaska Historical Society is made up of over 50 units, and it really is it is the creature of the local historical societies, the exhibit facilities, and the museums across Alaska. These are public and private entities. But it is these groups that came together and established the Alaska Historical Society. I think one of the most cheering developments is that as some of us who have inherited a Western tradition and some of the Western tools and are just beginning to learn something about the Eastern tools, and we're going to be hearing about that this morning and throughout this conference, that somehow we have discovered that the idea of a society or an organization or a group of people of like mind, or at least not really like mind, but like concerns, this tool is rapidly being used in the rural areas of Alaska. The last 5, I believe it's correct to say that the last 5 historical societies which have been founded around this state are in the Alaskan bush. I don't say hurrah for the bright bush to find a new tool because it was someone else's tool, but I do cheer the bush for knowing that it too can serve well. And I was personally touched when a member of our commission, we had a commission meeting in Anchorage this last Friday between the Oral History Workshop and the 8th annual meeting of the State Society, and I was deeply touched that Emily Ivanoff Brown from Unalakleet had spoken with Beatrice Langness, and Emily wanted to go to northern and western Alaska, to the communities, to help them look at the possibility, of this tool and whether it might serve them. We are learning from one another, and it gives us cheer because it brings us together. When you think of the Kenai Peninsula, if you're Bob Frederick, you think of a hallowed place. I only hope that you people who live here can keep it that way. I suppose you should do like Oregon and shut the rest of us out. There ought to be a gate there at the top of the pass. You know, Anchorage'ites stay the hell away. I mean, I hope this isn't recording. But Kenai has been a sanctuary for my sons and our daughter and my family through the years, a very precious sanctuary. And when you think of its entity and the unity it promises, and that you have, well, just think of, on this peninsula, you have the following historical societies. Well, you have a lot of other groups, too, that we don't think of immediately, of course. Libraries and bicentennial committees and schools, public schools, and so on, and many other organizations that are interested, and senior citizens groups and so on. You've got the Hope and Sunrise Historical Society up north here, the Whittier Historical Society, the Kenai Historical Society, the Damon Memorial Historical Museum, the Kasilof Area Historical Society, the Homer Society of Natural History. And if you really want to draw circles beyond your peninsula, then you're really in trouble, because you get into Cordova and Prince William Sound and the Kodiak and Aleutian Islands, and up there the Cook Inlet Society. But do you see what you have? You have something that probably no other spot in Alaska has. You have a promise and a potential, and you know what you have because you've created the Kenai Area Historical Association. You are organized, and so now you have the tools to create. James Cook, during the American Revolution, I'm so pleased that Morgan posed the question about what was the true motivation of Ben Franklin in the carte blanche, the letter of marque. James Cook, when he was entering with those two ships not very long ago, the mouth of the estuary which now bears his name, by the way, you do remember it was named, however, later Cook's River, not Cook Inlet. And when he came to this body of water, he was still in search of a guiding star. He was still in search, really, of many things, but one was the Northwest Passage. And if you go back to Cook's journal, and you really should, it's an exciting passage to read, because the day was dawning. He'd spent 8 days in Prince William Sound. He'd gone up every little cove, thinking that maybe this was it. And remember, it wasn't the first time he was doing this. This was a pattern which he followed. And finally, then he came out and was entering just the lower part of this precious inlet. The fog was such, as many of you who spend time in Kachemak Bay or down here at Kenai know. We don't know anything about this in Anchorage. But the fog was such that the peaks were above the fog, and as Cook reports in his journal, he thought perhaps this really was the passage, that when the fog would raise, there would be a passage. In a few moments, the fog did rise, and he reports his disappointment. But he makes a brief apology, and I don't have the quotation with me now, and I haven't memorized it. I will just exhort you to read it. It's a lovely 2 or 3 sentences. It's an apologia for the time he was going to commit to Cook Inlet and its exploration, because he knew that the winter was coming down upon him, and that every hour he spent in Cook Inlet, every minute he spent in Cook Inlet, charting it, making notes upon it, exploring it, he was losing in his northward search for the passage. So he makes these comments in hopes that someday his labors will prove valuable to others. Perhaps this isn't time wasted, he said, in a manner. But I think the most significant significant entry that he made in that journal were 2 phrases, which we've come to forget here. His master's mate, as he was a master's mate, you know, he never went to the Royal Academy. I mean, he never was a Royal Navy man. He received a direct commission because he knew so damn much about his craft. He took the apprenticeship in another way, if you will, and was one of the best cartographers I think the world has ever known, the modern world surely. And Henry Roberts, his master's mate, placed on the chart this name for this body of water, the Gulf of Good Hope. Now, True, he put it down before the fog raised. But he also placed a name upon this plateau, this land we find ourselves, this school we meet in. He saw its quality. He saw it as a plateau, an area that was inhabitable, and indeed I think that he had seen native peoples too. At least they had been reported. He'd been seeing them along the way. So he knew it was a good place for a habitat of man and animals, other animals. And Henry Roberts penned this name upon the Kenai Peninsula, the land of good prospect. How much he knew. I would only ask that each one of us come to appreciate something of the vastness of the historical environment of all of Alaska, and of, especially in these next days, our land of good prospect. I hope we can each learn to have a reverence for the face of the land itself, which after all is the area which shapes our own life. It is all we have nothing else, and so there must be a reverence for the face of the land itself. But I hope, too, that we can increasingly be aware of the evidences of material culture, that we can preserve these if they're worth preserving, that we, most important, can work toward the preservation of the mind and the spirit. And as Morgan has said, and others will say, I'm sure the preservation of that mind is difficult, because it is not singular mind, it's minds. I've often laughed at the title that Frederick Arts gave to his book, a magnificent volume on the Middle Ages. He called it The Mind of the Middle Ages, but it really is Minds of the Middle Ages. And Clark Whistler's final chapter in that book on the American Indian, called The Mind of the Indian. I do wish Stuart Udall knew a little bit more about diversity of minds. I hope that each one of us out of this conference, through the publication, what an extraordinary job. I have never been to a conference that issued its proceedings ahead of time, Morgan. We've got a hell of a lot to learn. Beautiful, because it's now. It's when people want to hear about it. You feel as if you can listen and you don't have to take all these notes. This is a fine tool. You are so fortunate you're provided with this. And these young men and women who are making possible the audio and video record, well, it just augurs in magnificent ways toward the accomplishment of your historical environment, its awareness, your contribution to it. We don't know enough about Alaskan history. And I've already taken too much time. My apologies. This is what happens, Madam Program Chairman, when you ask somebody to speak for somebody else. I'd like to close with this thought. I wrote it. It may be one of the few things worthwhile I have written. Perhaps the greatest need of multicultural Alaska is a sense of unity in diversity. The great land contains a cross-section of some very ancient Old and New World cultures, as well as Asian and Western cultures in their modern form. The 49th state offers an ethnographic laboratory in which expressions of creativity can be discovered in many elements and areas of cultural identification. One learns more about oneself through studying a different society, ethnic group, or civilization. Recognizing diversity as a fact in the universe, it can be celebrated for the richness it brings to our human scene. It is just this wealth of cultural variety which could enhance the quality of life for all Alaskan citizens. Unity may be reached through cross-cultural understanding and appreciation that the world and its peoples are complex, that many different parts constitute the whole, that all traditions offer something to the collective human experience. This must be understood. The purpose of history, it seems to me, has ever been to enlighten, to make clearer, to create greater understanding and appreciation. Here, at this most ancient continental corridor, through studying their multicultural heritage, Alaskans may once again discover, this time together, a sense of unity and the best passage to a new world. Thank you.
Another announcement, more or less. I understand some of you have been asking about buying books out here. You would see Dr. Frederick and Sue. Sue, that's a Finnish name. I don't think I can pronounce it. Where's Sue? Oh, okay. Sue. Can they purchase the books? All right, see Sue. Is Carol back here? Not yet. Okay, again, I have tickets, lunch tickets that Nancy Davis, Herb Hilscher, Norma Hoyt, Rachel Mickelson. It might be that they're on the plane. They won't get here till 11:30. I understand it's fog. The plane had to go back to Anchorage, and it is late. Well, KNA came through. We're very fortunate. And Mary Nyson, a cornerstone of this town, of Old Kenai, is going to speak with you, and she has assistants. Tom Stroman, a very good former student of mine, and is it Tom Tidwell? Tilton? Well, I'll let Tom introduce you. So Mary, if you and Tom will come forward, we'll continue our program. I think this is great. This is certainly impromptu. These people did not know they would be speaking until just about an hour ago. Tom about 10 minutes ago. So I think that's great, and I think they deserve a hand before they begin. So anything you have to say, Mary? Tom?
Well, I just don't know what to say, but I'll try my best. Well, I think I'll tell you that I was born and raised here, and my parents on both sides, they are Alaskans. So I've been here a long time. And anything that I tell you, I didn't get it out of a book, because I always asked. When I was growing up, I was all curious about what they used, like knife and weapons and stuff, you know, and how they cooked. And I was with my aunt a great deal, and things that puzzled me about how they cooked, I used to ask her. Well, it sounded, when she told me, it sounded fantastic to me. Their cooking utensils, they were baskets woven out of roots, and they used to heat up rocks red hot. The same thing we use for what you call sauna bath, and we call it nali or banya. They used to heat up these rocks red hot and put it in their big baskets. I think they put their food in there and the rocks. and that would cook the food. That was boiling. And for roasting, I think you all know how they roasted meat and fish over a fire. They had sticks. And another thing that puzzled me was how they cleaned their fish, you know, the knife part. And she told me she didn't know what the metal was. But anyway, they used to get it from the mountains. She said it was a shiny material. And they made knives out of that. And I guess some other places they used real sharp rocks for cutting. And I asked my father, he was born 1884. I used to ask him about Kenai. I lived here, I was born here, and I lived here all my life. But in 1884, after that, when he was going to school, the village was at Skituk, what we call Skituk. Skituk is where the FAA installation is. Used to be. That was Skituk. That's where they had their village. And then the priests come. Father Juvenali, I think he was one of the first priests and teacher that came here. He told me he went to school from Skituk to Kenai because they were building the church. And they taught Church Slavonic and some English because I saw some paper, some school papers with corrections in it. And my father went to school from there. And I think they moved from Skituk when this church, Holy Assumption, was finished. I think they well, anyway, it took about 13 years. This Father John was here, and he is the one that was instrumental in getting all these buildings done. The church and the school, the old Russian school. I understand that the old Russian school was the logs from the first church where the chapel is. They tore that down and made this Russian school. This school was used for a lot of things. They used it for parties, they used it for dances, and any occasion that came up. This Holy Assumption Church was finished in 1906. It was completed. And my father is the one that told me all about it. He said the chief carpenter was Alexander Darien. To some of you, Darien must be familiar because there's a bunch of them around. He said they got what material he told them to get. And like the picket fence, he said each man could make 25 pickets. That was his donation. And after the church was finished, and they wanted to do something about Iguman Nikolai. That's our first missionary. I think it was in 1848 that they first established this Kenai mission. And he lived here until 1863, I think. Something like that. He died here and they buried him there. Long time ago, church workers, priests, readers, and those people, starsters, you know, they were always buried in the churchyard. So Father Nikolai, he was buried there in the churchyard. And also his reader, he's buried there. But I remember when I was going to school that there was more crosses there. There must have been 7 or 8 crosses. You can't see them now. Well, anyway, Father John Bartnowski, after the church was completed and the bishop come to consecrate the new church, he came to Kenai, and there was 2 deacons traveling with him. One of them was Father Shadura. He wasn't a priest yet. After this church was consecrated, during the same divine liturgy, Father Paul Shadura, he was ordained, and he was assigned to the Kenai church. And he stayed here in Kenai for 47 years. And he serviced Kenai, Ninilchik, Saldovia, Tyonek, Susitna, Kanik, and Anchorage. He done that all once a year in the fall time. He took care of those people there. So when he moved away on account of his health, I forgot the year, but our Bishop Ambrosi, no, Bishop John, I think. Yeah, Bishop John, he wrote to us, to the sisterhood, to the church, and he told us it would be a great occasion for Kenai if we got busy and had a nice reception for this new priest. That's the time Father Nicholas Mooning was ordained. Kenai church was vacant, so he was assigned to Kenai, but he didn't serve us. Because Father Mooning, he was 76 years old, and to travel was too much for him. So we got along somehow by ourselves until Father Cyril came here. And for a while it was nice to have a priest again. Well, I don't know what else I can tell you. You have anything to say? Oh yeah, my grandfather, Cal Fornsky, he was interested in hunting. That's what he done. He used to go sea otter hunting to the Aleutian Islands. And in those days, boys, when they were 11, 12, well, they were men. They had their own guns, not guns, but weapons. Well, I think they had guns too. And they went. So my father used to go with my grandfather on these sea otter hunts. They used to have maybe 14 or 15 boats. These boats are canoes. I don't know if they're canoes, but anyway, they're sea-going skin boats. And they have double keel, so they can take the rough water and stuff. And if if they got caught in the rough weather on the way, like in the Gulf, well, they would lash all their body, they used to call them body, together. Lash them all together and cover up. They had holes. A lot of them would go inside the hole and then cover up the boats. And they might have one or two out on the lookout, you know, watch out. And that way they would sleep or sit out the storm. Anyway, that's the way, that's what I heard about my grandpa. It was nothing for them to go someplace down to southeastern Alaska along the coast of the lower 48, because my great-grandfather, Californsky, he went down to California, and that's how we got that name. That's the only way I can figure it. You know, he was named for something, for an area or anything. That's why we have that ski on the end. The Russians dubbed him, I think, Californsky. Oh, I don't know. If I knew I was going to be standing up here talking to you, I would have prepared something. But I think I'll let the students here take over and see what they can tell you.
First of all, I'm from the Kenai area, and really all I know about KNA is I've lived half of my life in the States, and I just want to give you my point of view of the program I'm in and some of the things that KNA is doing for me personally and the rest of the people. Well, I graduated from Kenai Central High School. I really never had any plans of going to school, or I never thought of what I was going to do in the future. But in this program, I've had a fairly good background in accounting, some business law, and this and that. And it's helped me. I plan to go on to school. It's got programs like the Controlled Environmental Agriculture. That's really new in Alaska and in most states of the United States. And if we really make KNA work, it'll benefit Alaska, the natives, and everyone else. And I just pray to God it does work the way we figure it will.
I'm Thomas Tolan, and I'm from the Nushagak area, and somehow Nushagak and Kenai here is related. And the book there that you all have, you'll see that Father Nicholas traveled over into the Nushagak area in the 19th century. So we are related somehow. And I'm just going to school out here in KNA here, taking advantage of the course they're offering, the business management course. And so far I've enjoyed it. And I think it's benefiting a lot of Alaska natives so far that I know of. Since we've been started this course, 2 or more of the class members have gone on to a further education, went on to college. And like Tom says, he plans on going on, and so do I. I'm not very much of a speech giver, so goodbye.
Tom, come back here. Tom Stroman. You mentioned some of the things that plans for KNA in the future. Do you know some of the plans for the Kenai Native Association in the future? Come on. I really think that people would like to know, you know, if you can think of things that, or if the audience, people out in from KNA who are here, if you just tell us some of your plans. Tom, we'll start with you.
Well, quite a few of the programs that KNA has is mostly educational. They have marine fisheries, business management, pilot ground school, a number of others that right now, looking at all these faces, I can't think too good. But I think that's one step. We got to get the education and the facilities first, and that's what we're working for. And we need help. Mrs. Farnsworth could tell you more about the educational programs. Excuse me.
Thank you very much, Tom. Well, is there anyone else from Mount KNA or Wildwood who would like to add to what Tom said? Or do any of you have questions to ask these people? One interesting thing going on out there is the environmental agricultural program. It's part of the university program, though, but it might feed Alaska one of these days. And maybe Mrs. Farnsworth can tell a little bit about that.
Thank you, Peggy. I feel that I can tell you a little bit about the Kenai Native Association. I've been out there for 2 years now teaching the business management program. And I've had passed through my class in that time about 75 students. In the beginning, Kenai Native Association had quite a program going, which was under the Indian Action Program that was financed by the BIA. They did have a pilot's training program. They had carpenter training. They had heavy-duty equipment training. They had a mechanics program and the business management. Now we're down to just the business management and the fisheries program. And they're hoping for funding starting January 1 again. But whether it'll be a reality or not, we don't know. The Kenai Native Association is trying to get businesses at Wildwood to keep them going. They are furnishing housing now, not just to the natives, but to anybody that wants to come out there and rent. They do have the boarding home program, which includes students that do come to the Kenai Central High School, to the Kenai Junior High, and to the elementary schools. These students are from all over Alaska, and again, it's a BIA-financed and state-financed program. They have housing for those students out there. They do have counselors for them out there. They have all sorts of programs for them out there, and especially with the new Indian Act that came through, they have received quite a bit more funding, which has also trickled down to the Kenai Central High School in the way of tutors and aides to these Native children that do need help in the school because they haven't received the education that our students have. The Kenai Native Association also has the CEA project, which is a controlled environmental agricultural project, which is quite an undertaking. And they're using one of the buildings out at Wildwood that was used as a communication center that was controlled as far as the environment was concerned in that building, and they're putting this to use. The funds came for that from the federal government and from General Electric, and they're working on this together. And we have the University of Alaska also that is working with them in this project. They are selling vegetables from there now in the way of tomatoes and lettuce and cucumbers, and it's the first time I've had tomatoes that have been grown in a hothouse that tasted like fresh garden tomatoes. Truly are good, and I think that you probably have been able to buy them in some of the markets locally. KNA in their fisheries program do have 2 boats. One is a large fishing boat that they use to train the students on, and they also have a crane barge that they have been working on where the students can get training. They are working now to come about with some pipeline contracts which would provide employment for the Kenai natives. And they are also working on services. They are trying to start a grocery store out there which would service people in that area and others that want to go there. And they are also trying to come up with some other services for their people. So on the whole, they really are progressing. The land that the Kenai Native Association has is the land that they received, part of the land that they're entitled to under the Native Land Claims Settlement Act. This is another area that we touch upon in the business management class, is the native land claims. And part of the training the fishery students receive also is record keeping, and so they come to my class to receive some training for this. One of the things I try to discuss with them is the native land claims, to let them know what it's all about and what they're receiving under it. And the last session that we had here a couple of weeks ago, the students said, well, how come we didn't know anything about this? And I said, well, how come you didn't try to find out something out, about the native land claims? But the thing is that there is no way for them to find out about it unless they can attend some sort of a class. And there aren't many people that know about the native land claims because it's so new. But the information does have to get to them, and training programs is one of the ways that it can get to them. So all in all, I think the Kenai Native Association is really and truly working for their natives and helping them out. That prompted me to come up here. One of the things that we undertook in the business management class that was just a side thing that happened to the students. One was from Nundalton and the other one was Kenai students. Got to talking about the fact that somehow or other they were related to the Wilson family. And I said, well, why don't you sit down and figure it out? Well, because of their wanting to find out whether they were related or not, we started what was a family tree. And the family tree started with the original Wilsons that came to Kenai and married a native woman here. And as a result of that, there were 4 children. The 2 of the children stayed and married, which is now what we have as a nucleus of the Wilson family. And in making this tree, we have our walls covered with papers and all this information that we're trying to sift down into a book. But so far, we have 375 descendants of that original Wilson family right here in the Kenai and the vicinity area.
I think the Mayor's Bicentennial Committee will be contacting you. We had that idea of tracing, like the Shadura family, the Wilson family, and the Ivanov family. So it's good information to know. Is there anyone else who would like to add anything about KNA, what it's doing, how you feel? We have some time before it is time to go to lunch. There's one. Oh, Sister Victoria. Okay. This is Sister Victoria of St. Herman's Pastoral School. She's now at Kodiak.
I don't think that this opportunity should be passed up without mentioning the fact that it was the Kenai Native Association which gave the start to St. Herman's Pastoral School in February of 1973. Since 1917, the Russian Orthodox Church here in Alaska has had no schools. In that year, funding was completely cut off because of the revolution in Russia, and the church in all of North America found itself, well, penniless. During all of these years, there's been a great need for training Alaskans for the more than 80 churches and Orthodox communities in the state. We were obliged to send Native Alaskans to the lower 48 in recent years, when at last the church in that part of the states was able to organize some schools. But we needed education here for Native Alaskans who would be leaders in the Russian Orthodox Church here. We had a church meeting in 1973 that decided to found such a school. But we had no funds, we had no teachers, and we had no place. Probably because of the intercessions of our father, St. Herman of Alaska, to whom we dedicated our school. We were very fortunate in finding teachers in a very short time. Funding came miraculously, a good part of it from the BIA through scholarship aid. But all of that would have come to nothing if it wasn't for the Kenai Native Association and the help of George Miller, who offered us facilities at Wildwood Station, which we were able to occupy for a year and a half. We weren't able to continue at Wildwood, but in any case, if that had not been offered to us in the nick of time, we would have no St. Herman's Pastoral School today. The school has now relocated in Kodiak and continues there to train readers, deacons, and priests for the church in Alaska, and to carry on all sorts of other work, some of which I think I may have mentioned in some footnotes in the paper. But I wanted to mention this one thing about KNA at this time. Thank you.